One thing I did witness was that paranoid Jews and Pennsylvania organized criminals staked out JFK's airplane and brought him down. It was the same circle of people who tipped me off in advance that they had it in for Princess Diana. My comment, Teresa, about your husband was made privately to a friend after Senator Hines died in an accident that would seem to me mysterious. Now, a lot of people after he was dead, there was nothing premeditated or even thinking about. I mean, if you look at Seattle, their report about me says I targeted David Stone. It doesn't even pass the absurdity exam. Why would I target David Stone? I've never met him. I barely knew who he was. I may have been suspicious about him. So are you going to say that I voiced suspicions about Senator Hines? To my recollection, I did not. I would have preferred Harris Wofford to Senator Santorum, but what does that have to do with me anyway? It doesn't have anything to do with me. I made no comment and was received no advance notice of any sort. After he was dead, I said maybe the people defending the victims of AIDS killed him over Mount Desert Island, which Pennsylvania was covering and had a stake in organizing. This was self-deception. Now, before you say that I was self-deceived, it was self-deception that came from the office of Peter Gabriel, who were deceiving me about what happened on Mount Desert Island so they could set up the slavery operation of interrogation over John Lennon. A nightmarish, integrated, genocidal approach to the counterculture, run by John Lennon's associates. That screams deception operation. If you look at Hamas, the situation in the Blue House in Seattle was a rave massacre of a MAGA type. The situation, Putin, in the Cosmonaut Cafe, overlooked the supernova here in Seattle, and there was a supernova explosion in Lebanon. I was cased by James W. Child, author of Nuclear War, the Moral Dimension. So it's a nuclear ultimatum over abortion. Again, it's a genocidal tactic to persecute the counterculture run by Yoko Ono and her franchise. So if you think Hamas attacked the supernova without the approval of Israel, you are mistaken. But a lot of people think that. We're being taught to think that. I was being taught by Zappa to think that there were people who were concerned about this strange operation on Mount Desert Island. My first comment, my most lasting comment about John Hines' murder was that it was counter to any hope that I would have had of rousing suspicions about my being surrounded that way on a place called Mount Desert Island, to which I was lured, because it threw a barrier of blood over that. They said, no, we're not going to listen to you because you got John Hines killed. I deny that I got John Hines killed. Something different than my getting John Hines killed happened. But Pittsburgh and Seattle lied. They said, oh, I targeted David Stone as a subscription method to deter questioning the system that they had put into place about Will Zellbrome on Mount Desert Island, in which the whole issue of John Lennon holds copyright to me. Now, I knew that Shannon Hartz was going to be killed and warned the school because of the C and the Star of David. I could see that they were staking out this hysterical penny franchise line, which they're still at. They justified poisoning me in the food because they say they were going to have a barbecue. This is the hysterical dimension of the perpetrators. Diamond DeGaulis was masquerading as representing the victims, but she was a premeditated perpetrator of the whole affair. So what you're doing is justifying the AIDS attack. And let's not pretend otherwise. John Lennon was used to give the excuse to the operation that was given through a deception campaign. The supernova catastrophe was a hysterical revenge attack called Two Virgins, because the real barrier of blood was between me and Midori Goto. And she's the one who erected the barrier of blood. She's the one who was getting revenge on me. And before you think, oh, maybe Yoko Ono set John Lennon up, you would be mistaken. John Lennon was in on it. It traces all the way back through Hollywood to Fayum at the birthplace in a counterfeiting den of Hollywood in The Great Dictators. He was the personality cult of the fourth dimensional warlord idea that they call Casper, that we're living with through and dealing with now. So I don't think you should attach credibility to anything the Pennsylvania or Seattle says, because they are cold-blooded liars. You can go back through this in transcript and quote every word that I said, and you will see that it all checks out. Check, true, check, true, check, true, check, true, check, true. And they will say, so what? Because we believe and want to say things that are totally chaotic production, total chaos production, that we want to take action on to silence a narrative that is different from our deception campaign. And that's what they mean by establishing a narrative. That's why the whole idea of establishing a narrative got into vogue. Dan Rather, who's indexed for What You Would Rather Believe, said he saw Candy's head go violently forward. The opposite of what he saw, but nobody fact-checked that because the film was put away in a vault for 12 years. Dick Gregory got it out. Dick Gregory was a black man. How did they get the black people to gang up on little Jimmy Carey? I don't want to know. You ask them. Don't feed it back to me. Because I've many times cited the honor and nobility and courage of the black community when it came to defending me. It's ridiculous what the Obamas are selling. It's ridiculous slander. It is total garbage, which Penny Crow used to call garbage. And it is garbage for them. They made it into a plastic reality that they can profit from. It's a hoot. My comment about John Hines came after he died. I had heard nothing whatsoever. No indication at all that anything was implanted for him. Nothing whatsoever to indicate or to incite harm to him. I would never do that. It was an absurdity to try to pin the tail on the donkey, but they've been doing it ever since they came up with the idea saying Queerball could have saved John Lennon when they were kicking me in the head, as Greg Carl put it, a brutal fortissimo pounding, remember? I'm the walrus. You can almost hear that there. A brutal fortissimo pounding. Woo! Woo! Men should see him kicking like Allan Poe. A brutal fortissimo pounding.